So without further ado, let me introduce to you to Timothy McAliley. Did I say, I'm not sure if I said that right. Timothy, I apologize if I
No
didn't.
worries. You kind of added a second, a third L sound, so it's McAliley. Yep,
McAliley. Okay, thank you.
no problem.
So Timothy's a senior cloud architect at Microsoft with over 26 years experience in IT, 13 of those years at Microsoft at least. His experience spans SQL Server, Azure Data Services, Power BI, and Microsoft Fabric. In addition to his work at Microsoft, he serves as an adjunct professor at George Mason University and is currently pursuing a doctorate in IT. Um, he holds a Bachelor of Science from Florida State, Master of Liberal Arts from Harvard, and he currently lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, two daughters, two cats, and a yellow lab named Lily. I love that. Timothy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Amy. And hi everybody. I'll come off. I'll turn off my camera when I start the presentation here momentarily. Thanks for inviting me. It's a thrill to be here. And actually, I'm on the Microsoft North Carolina state or the state of North Carolina account team. So if I don't know you or work with you directly, I'm sure we'll run into each other down the road. I meet with a large user group for Power BI within the state of North Carolina government on Thursdays, and we talk about Power BI issues and things like that. So, well, let's get started and talk about Microsoft accessibility. Um, I keep looking back. My dog Lily, uh, when she hears me chatting, sometimes she'll come and sit right next to me. So I was going to show her off, but she's a little 4-year-old lab. She's very, very cute. All right, let's get right into it then. And thanks for the nice introduction. I appreciate that. All righty. So let's talk about Power BI accessibility. Um, it was really broken into two parts. We're going to do one part is going to be slide driven, and the next part will be more demo driven. But I still have screenshots for everything I'm going to demo. So I'll send the slide deck to Amy, and so that you could watch the recording or you can look at the slides and get an idea of what we talked about. But part one, we're going to discuss an overview of accessibility and talk about universal design and accessibility standards, which is kind of the foundation on which Power BI was built. And then we'll talk about designing reports for accessibility, creating reports in Power BI using accessibility tools, and then consuming Power BI reports by using accessibility features. Hold on, let me grab a quick swig of coffee. Then part two, we'll do a demo where we'll talk about descriptive titles, tab order, chart markers, alt text, accessible themes, accessibility settings. There's only really one, really like a setting in the Power BI desktop software, um, like in the options and settings area. We'll take a look at that one setting on improved narrator support, contrast settings, and we'll show visuals as tables, which is another option if you have a challenge in looking at data in a visual perspective. This will show you the data in a tabular perspective. So an overview of accessibility for Power BI, and this is a quote, this is really, consider different types of users who might be looking at your report that you built. And you want to be able to create reports that are easily navigated and understood, comprehended by keyboard or screen reader users.
Timothy, can I interrupt you a second?
Sure.
We have some questions in the chat. We're not seeing your screen. Are you sharing it?
Am I not? Hold on. Boo, Tim. Boo. Let me go back one then and just my goodness.
There we
No,
see it. Thank you so much.
boo us for not telling you sooner.
Well, I came online and I shared my screen immediately, but I said, "Oh, well, let me, I better back up and let Amy and the other organizers share their screens." So I wasn't trying to be presumptuous. Sorry about that. Again, state of North Carolina, Power BI accessibility. You heard my narration with this. I'm on the Microsoft account team, and I coordinate with a big user group inside the state of North Carolina that we meet on Thursdays for part one of this. We'll talk about universal design, accessibility standards, designing, creating, and consuming reports around the theme of accessibility. The demo part of this, we'll talk about descriptive titles, tab order, chart markers, alt text, accessible themes, accessibility settings, contrast settings, and showing visuals as tables. Thank you so much for telling me about not sharing. That really, if people can't see what you're talking about, then they will call that to your attention quite quickly. Thank you. Here's the quote I was kind of paraphrasing. In terms of an overview of Power BI accessibility, you consider different types of users who might be reading your reports, might be consuming your reports. And you can create reports that are easily navigated and easily comprehended by keyboard or screen reader users. And then your reports that are accessible enable these users who might have a visual or physical impairment to benefit from your reports. And that's kind of the big overview of it. And then it's based on principles of universal design, right? And that's where we're trying to design things, products, not just Power BI, but products that are as usable by as many people as reasonably possible without having to do any special adaptation or special design. So when creating reports in Power BI, think about the needs of your users. Think about the broad needs of your different users who are looking at your Power BI reports. There are some Power BI accessibility standards. There are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1, and that's founded on the principle that you have information in your report that's perceivable, operable, and understandable and robust, right? You want the information and the user interface components need to be presentable to users in a way they can understand, can perceive. Operable. You want to make sure that the interface components work and the navigation works. Understandable. You want it to be comprehensible. You want it to be that information, the operation of that report needs to be understandable by a broad body of people, your report consumers. You want it to be robust. You want it to be interpreted by a wide range of user agents, including assistive technologies, narrators, keyboard, tab order, things like that. And then there is a standard for European conformance, and then there's a U.S. accessibility conformance. And you can take a look at, let me get a little, let me get my web part up. You can take a look at some of the accessibility standards. Let me drag this over. I'm sorry, guys. You can take a look at some of the accessibility standards. Where's my accessibility standards? My goodness, let me get rid of this. Here we go. You can take a look at these accessibility performance reports for any number of Microsoft products. Let me drag this little toolbar over. So you want to go and say, oh, I want to search on Power BI. And search on Power BI. You can get breaks it down into Power BI desktop, Power BI, the service, Power BI mobile, Power BI for Windows or Android or iPhone devices, Power BI for the teams. But if you were to go and look at these different reports for accessibility standards, they break them down, multi-language support, Section 508 summary, the WCAG standards. So you can take a look at these different types of conformance reports that are out there for accessibility standards. And you can see where Microsoft is positioned to make Power BI an accessible system for consuming reports. In terms of designing Power BI reports for accessibility, there's the slide here, but most important, or just as important as the slide, the web link that I provide for this, that's part of the accessibility designing, or an overview accessibility in Power BI, designing accessible reports. These slides that I'm presenting kind of follow along this pattern. So you can look at the documentation as well. But some type of accessibility features that you would design a Power BI report for. For accessibility where you don't have any configuration required. You can do things, set up things for keyboard navigation, screen reader compatibility. There are modes for high contrast colors. There's focus mode, and that's where focus mode takes a visualization that might be, you might have 5 visualizations on a report, but you can go focus mode on a specific visualization and it'll blow that visualization up to take up the entire screen and then maybe show a small little bit of tabular data underneath the bottom. So you can really get a focus on that visualization. Or you can do show table or show data table, which takes the visualizations on a report page, instead of showing them as pie charts or bar charts or clustered column charts, it'll show them all as tables. And then there's some built-in accessibility features that do require some configuration. There's an alt text, and your alt text would be text that can be picked up by a screen reader or a narrator. And you would want to make your alt text as descriptive as possible, not use shorthand or maybe an internal departmental type term. Make it broad and understandable for the the narration software that might be reading that alt text. We'll take a look at alt text. Tab order. You have to configure the different tabs and the order of those tabs as a person might click through a certain part of a report and want to do it in a certain tab order. Titles and labels. The part, these are things you'll put on your report, but there's some configuration required because you might change the title, change the label into something that's not abbreviated, not shorthand, much more clear to a person who looks at the title, looks at a label, and because of how clearly it's written, can easily figure out what this report is or what these visualizations do. Markers, another piece of configuration that you would want to do. And let's say you've got a line chart, and the line chart is a couple of different elements across the y-axis that are going across the x-axis, and you want to show milestones or certain markers, either like a date-based marker or a financial marker where you've hit $100,000 in revenue, or it's the month of June. You can have these markers per axis. So you could have a triangle or a circle or a square, you can do different shapes, different colors to kind of highlight the line charts on your visualization so you can see much more clearly in a visualization of what's trying to be shown. Not just the line itself going across the elements of data, but you get markers that kind of call out those values. And then there's report themes, and that's where you can have certain accessibility themes that do different color contrast, that make visualization stand out, or makes the background theme for the report stand out. And there's some accessible themes that you can download or you can use that are baked into the Power BI desktop software, but there's also a ton of accessible themes out on the web. We'll take a look at both of those. And then understand what your audience wants. If you're designing Power BI reports for accessibility, making sure you understand what your audience wants, and then keeping your report simple and consistent in terms of the information you're trying to deliver. And then also test for vision challenges as well when you're designing your reports.
Timothy, would you like the questions as you go along, or would you want to save them?
Let's do this. If you have a question, and that's a good question, your question was a good question. If you have a question, let's wait until the end to pose the question. But if it's a question that I can easily answer, I'll swat it out. But if it's an answer that might require some research, I'll ask that you maybe type it in chat so that I can grab it and then copy it off and do some research and get back to you later today or early tomorrow with an answer. Does that sound like a good deal? We'll hold questions to the end. And if it's a long form question, I can do some research around it and get back to you with an answer. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Sure. All righty. So types of accessibility features. Again, Power BI provides the capability to create accessible reports, but as the report author, you want to incorporate these features, these capabilities into your reports. So again, kind of repeating myself, no configuration required. There's some that do require configuration, and there's just the other piece, which is making sure you understand your audience and test for low vision and make sure your reports are consistent. And then there's some built-in accessibility features like keyboard navigation, screen reader compatibility, being able to design for high contrast colors view, focus mode, and show data as a table. I know that kind of repeats those two slides. Alt text, tab order, tiles and labels, and then markers and report themes. There's actually a Power BI accessibility checklist that we can take a look at here in just a little bit, but it kind of goes through the different aspects of accessibility that are baked into Power BI. And so as you're designing your reports, getting ready to publish reports, you can make sure that you've got everything from visuals on a report page, or all visuals in a report, or your slicers, your text boxes, your visual interactions, your sort ordering. All these things are designed with accessibility around that. Rather than go through all these individually, I would take a look at that accessibility, a report accessibility checklist. Again, I provide all the links. Now, creating Power BI reports with accessibility tools. Oh, sorry about that. There's, app level navigation, being able to navigate inside of the Power BI desktop. There's being able to navigate inside the ribbon. There's being able to navigate inside the visualizations in some sort of a tab order. There's the fields well, be able to create reports with accessibility tools and to be able to see elements that you're adding to the report using the fields well for different visualizations. There's the formatting pane that you could do different types of formatting, font size, font style, certain data elements that you want to bring in, data labeling. There's data list navigation, selection pane navigation, and there's dialog boxes that you can leverage for Power BI desktop, and then there's high contrast support. Then in terms of consuming Power BI reports by using these accessibility features, you'd want to, use keyboard to navigate in general, or do keyboard or keyboard navigation for visuals, keyboard navigation for slicers, being able to switch between report pages, accessing the visualizations, the visualization headers, looking at the report through high contrast mode, leveraging a screen reader, showing visuals as a table, which is in preview. That's a little bit different. I just mentioned focus mode. Focus mode gives you a tabular representation as well as a blown up view of the visualization. Show visuals as a table takes all the visualizations on your page and then shows them as a table. I know I've repeated that, and then there's some limitations for, show visuals as a table. Doesn't apply to dashboards. Dashboards different from a report. I'll show you that. And then show visuals as table only applies to the current report you're viewing. Each new report needs to have that feature activated. And then show visuals as table doesn't apply to, there's certain visuals that it doesn't work with, like a slicer or a card or smart narrative, or if you've brought in Power Apps or paginated reports, or if you're using key influencers or Q&A visuals. Smart narrative, key influencers, and Q&A are part of our machine learning generated visualizations. So I could see why those don't show as a table. All right, now let's jump into our demo. And for our demo, we're gonna do descriptive titles, tab order, chart markers, alt text, accessible themes, accessibility settings, contrast settings, and then show visuals as tables. And just to show you, I've got screenshots of all of this. So if you don't want to watch the video, you can play along and look at the slides and see exactly where I was in Power BI or the Power BI service. And then there's a nice a slide filled with links on the back end. But let's kind of go over to our demo here, and let's show the the descriptive titles piece. And right off the bat, you can see, let me smish this down a little bit so we can see. So right off the bat, AdventureWorks quarterly regional sales report. There's no abbreviations. There's no QTL for quarterly or the visualizations, monthly order total by product region or monthly order quantities by orders. These are full, natural language sentences that you can look at the visualization and say, okay, I got it. You can also see the data labels, product region. The regions aren't abbreviated. The X and Y axes are clear. Sum of order total by month, sum of order quantity by month, and sum of order quantity by product and region. All these are nice and clear for these visualizations. And these charts, even the text, was renamed for clarity. And then for tab order, to get to tab order, you would go, I'll just kind of go back here. Here's the home view of Power BI Desktop. You would go to the view ribbon, and in the view ribbon, you would go into selection. And then in selection, there's a tab order section, and you can see the tab order. And this is how a report author might want to present this report if a user was using a keyboard and using the tab key on a keyboard to tab through this report. And you can see if I go to here and I go, I can go tab once, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4, and you can see how this corresponds to the order. There's also additional features like bookmarks and things like that, and bookmark navigators you could use. Also, chart markers. Chart markers are shown right here. And notice the lines here with the little markers. And they're really marked at a month for Asia, Europe, and North America for February, March, and April. And you've got different shapes, right? You've got a circle for Asia, a diamond for Europe, and then a square for North America, with a line and a marker kind of distinguishing each of those regions. But the markers themselves provide that additional call to attention, right? I can figure out which marker is representing which region for the month of March or the month of February or the month of April, just by simply looking at the line and how they're intersecting with the markers. And you can see these markers. You can go and just click on the visualization and go into the visualization. Right, every visualization has different properties that you guys know. There's the X and Y axes and legends and things of that nature. But if you go into format on this visualization, and you can go into markers, and you could go in, apply the different settings, apply the markers to maybe just one. You could go and decide on the shapes for your markers, and the size and the color and the borders of your marker if you want a border. But again, the marker, similar to, making sure that you have a descriptive title. It's a descriptive way for you to show a line chart. And then alt text, you can go and let's say I'll just go into alt text. I'll go into order quantities, monthly order quantities by product region. And I'll go into alt text, and I'll go not on the visualization properties, but on the formatting section of the visualization. And I'll go down into my general area, right? Visual for formatting, you have visual and general. I'll go into alt text, and you can see what the alt text looks like for this visualization. That'll be picked up by a narrator or screen reader and be read back to the user who might be looking at this report through a screen reader interface. And that's very helpful. Now, this is, one of those configurable things like the markers before, or the descriptive titles, where you have to put in robust, descriptive alt text for your readers. Then there's accessibility themes, and you can see there's themes here. You know, it shows, you know, the standard colors of your visualizations and maybe some background here. In the background on a theme might have little watermarks to align visualizations. But you can also go in Power BI Desktop and go and look at accessibility themes or accessible themes that might have a certain round of contrast, or format the background canvas in a certain way, or present fonts or visualizations in a certain way. Also, if you can also customize a theme, but if a theme doesn't really, like, I don't really like any of these themes, you can go out to the community and click on accessible themes, and you can see the themes that are based on accessibility for your different themes that are out there. So you're never kind of stuck. There's always some additional help out there. And then for Power BI Desktop, in terms of accessible themes itself, like, is there another button that kind of lines up everything? No, not really. If you go to options, file, options and settings, if you go into options, oh, sorry, I didn't click on, yeah, if you go into options, and then there's a global and current file for your different types of, but if you go into report settings, the only thing that I really could find that's specific to accessibility is always run Power BI Desktop with improved narrator support. And Power BI is updated every month, so sometimes there's improvements to different features. Certainly narrator is one of those, but always run Power BI Desktop with improved narrator support. And then if you go to home and you go to the Power BI service, and that's this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at a Power BI workspace with a Power BI report and a Power BI dashboard, basically with the same report that we just looked at, but just published to the web. You can go into this report, and if you wanted to say, I want to make sure this is designed for, high contrast needs, you can go to this. You can go and look at high contrast for option 1, black with yellow font or really bright yellow font. You can go and do, you can do high contrast 2, which is black with a green font. You can do high contrast black, which is black with a white font and lines. And you can also do, high contrast white, which is white background with black font and visualization lines. And you could also go and say, okay, I don't want any contrast. Also, if you wanted from this area, again, from a published Power BI report, you could do show visuals as tables, and that's right here. Show visuals and when we say by preview, with their preview in Power BI parlance or Microsoft parlance means it's out there, the community's given input about it, it's not released into general availability, it's not baked in yet, they're still taking in comments. So, but you've got these 3 visualizations here. I can say show visuals as tables, and you can see these visualizations, they're now tables. And that might be better for someone who is more oriented toward reading this type of information versus seeing it in, a traditional Power BI visualization. You can go back to change this and say, show original visuals. Also, you can also go look at reports in, it's a couple different modes. I mentioned focus mode. You can look at a report in focus mode. And focus mode Sometimes focus mode will show a little tabular data underneath, but you can see the mode, it just blows up the screen. That's all it really does in this case. And you can still get the Power BI visualization, sort axis, sort legends, get insight, show his table. So you can get a little table that will show, kind of like splits the screen or gives 3/4 of the screen, I would say, to the visualization, but also shows, a table underneath, a tabular representation of this as well. Kind of like the best of both worlds. This is per visualization, whereas the show visuals as tables is for the whole report page. I'll go back to my report. There's also spotlight mode, and spotlight mode is not so much an accessibility feature, it's more of an attention focuser. I want to mute all the other colors here and just show spotlight mode, which, again, not really an accessibility feature per se, but if you maybe have attention issues, you might look at something in spotlight mode so you can focus on it. I'll take it off with spotlight mode. Also, if you look at the Power BI dashboard, the dashboard itself doesn't have a slew of accessibility features. Oh, sorry. If you look at the dashboard itself, it's got full screen mode, exit full screen mode. I can, edit the dashboard, maybe change the dashboard theme, make it, I can upload a theme. I can do colorblind friendly for this if I wanted. Change the mode, change it to a custom dashboard theme, but nothing really too much in the way of accessibility specifically for the dashboard. The main piece for the Power BI cloud-based analytics for accessibility, the main area is really the Power BI report that you see generated right here. And then we'll be, I'm sure, integrating new pieces, Copilot features, Copilot aided narration, and things of that nature. All right, and then my last slide here, I just want to show you. I've got some good documentation here. I've got documentation that covers an overview accessibility, creating accessible reports in Power BI, create reports using accessibility tools, consume reports in Power BI with accessibility tools. The creating accessible reports in Power BI has the accessibility checklist. There's keyboard shortcuts in Power BI desktop, accessibility conformance reports. Oh, and then there's a GitHub site that this gentleman, Mr. Miller, Jim J, I don't know the first letter. I don't know the name for the first letter, but J Miller has created a GitHub site. And on this GitHub site, he has added an accessibility report. So you can see this. There's an accessible Power BI report. I downloaded it. That's what we're demoing. He added some descriptive titles, alt text, markers, accessible themes, changed the tab order. He has a case study about it. And then a downloadable PBIX, which we're looking at right now. That's what this report is based on. But I published it and did some additional things to it. So it's really good. And it's a good starting point if you want to kind of dig into accessibility a little bit. But then all the documentation that I have here, I've got an overview of accessibility in Power BI that covers universal design, the accessibility standards, conformance documentation, designing reports for accessibility, creating reports in Power BI using accessibility tools, consuming Power BI reports by using accessibility features, keyboard shortcuts, accessibility reports, then the themes, and then a little bit on focus mode, and then the J Miller accessibility GitHub. Alrighty. What are your questions?
That was awesome. Thank you, Timothy. I
Sure.
have a couple questions in the chat, and we'll start with, are the drop-down title options readable in screen reader for visually impaired?
Let me see, are the drop-down title options readable in, I think that is the case, Neha. But let me do some checking just to make sure how readable, what kind of interaction you get with the drop-down title options to make sure that you get a reasonable amount of information from a screen reader reading a drop-down title. But let me check on that.
Nia has another question just a little bit further down about the contrasting colors.
When we're looking for contrasting colors, we are looking for contrast of the colors. Oh no, are we looking for contrast of the colors with each other or with the background? I believe there's accessibility themes that kind of address this, but right off of the bat, if you do like the high contrast with the yellow lines in font, or the green lines in font with the black background, or the white lines in font, or the white background with the black lines in font, I believe that's just for the colors to contrast with the background itself. But I believe if you go and look at the accessibility themes, you can see multiple colors that would kind of target what you're asking about in a way that's different from just simply contrasting with the background color.
Right, and thanks for that answer, Tim. The reason I asked both these questions is that we are working on this dashboard and we are trying to make it as accessible as possible. It's not, unfortunately, not in Power BI currently, but so some of the accessibility built-ins that Power BI offers are unfortunately not available there. So we are trying to get it to to the maximum accessibility as possible. So with that in mind, with the contrasting colors, we are trying to create a map. We have a map already, which has different counties at different, say, incidence levels of disease. We are trying to project, which ones are the highest incidence of disease, and which ones are in the red zone and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that when we use multiple colors in the maps, the contrast between those colors changes. With the background, it's all great. With the background, all colors are fine. But with each other, if you try to change one color into the perfect contrast range, the other pair contrast changes. So
yeah.
So, so that's why the question of we're trying to get as much contrast as possible between the pairs as well, but it's just too difficult and task to have it perfect.
Yeah. Again, have you not found anything in the themes area where you can change, find some balance between what you're looking for and maybe an existing themes offering, even if you customize the theme a little bit? But I guess it's a rolling challenge.
It is a rolling challenge, but I think I'll have to look a bit deeper into Power BI themes that are offered to get a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
also,
but yeah, that is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, also take a look at the community link that's in the slides, because there's plenty of community done accessibility themes that might more closely align with what you need. Right, at least worth looking at.
Right. And I mean, for us, it's a little bit of a challenge because we are trying to convey a message that this is not good. Having some counties in the red is not good, right? So it's having that gradation of colors, which someone has suggested in chat as well. We were thinking along those lines, whether that brings a better contrast out, but it loses the message. Because we are trying to not just show the darkest color, we are trying to say that we need to do something about this. So Yeah, but I'm just putting, these questions out there for folks to think about.
Sure, sure, sure. Thank you very much for the question.
And we have a question from Johnny Jones. Feel free to come off of mute, Johnny.
I know, Johnny.
Yeah, this is the same question I asked in an email yesterday or whenever, but this is a different audience. When we put something on a public website, we had to use a publish to web format. So how many of the accessibility options go away in the publish to web? Because it is a very limited interface.
I'll have to do some research on that one because you should not lose the contrast features. You should not lose the show as table. You should not lose the tab order. You shouldn't lose your alt text. You should not lose any of that. But let me double check and make sure, Johnny. I'll write it down that one.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Feel free to come off mute if you have any questions for Tim while he's here. I will mention in the chat that John Cotter will be presenting next month about color, why it's important. You know, some people can't distinguish red, so we look forward to that.
Excellent. Let's see. Is there any accessibility checker? There really is not. There's this, and then Boone had asked this, and there is, let me go to the end here. Hold on real quick, Boone. Let me get here. Where's my checklist? Shoot. There's a Power BI accessibility checklist. Where is it? Performance reports. Shoot. Oh yeah, right here. And I thought I had this open. This is really part of this, more of a subset of a longer article on design accessibility. There's a checklist for report accessibility, covering visuals and slicers and visual interaction, sort order, tooltips, audio, video, images, Power BI visuals. But inside the Power BI desktop, there's no, like I was showing, there's no, one set button for accessibility that'll align things with accessibility features. There's, just this always run Power BI desktop with improved narrator support. And then there's the accessibility themes. But yeah, Boone, there's no, broad accessibility setting to make sure it all kind of works for people who might need accessibility settings turned on. What kinds of data visualizations are easier to make accessible? Well, the things you're looking for accessibility are alt text, which can be done for both of those, or for any of the visual, any visualization you can put in alt text for. Line markers could be important, but you could also do data labels. It really just depends, John, what kind of visualization you're using and which ones are you for accessibility. You probably, if you have someone who might have a vision challenge, you probably don't want to use, cluster graphs or cluster charts where you just got, it looks like someone shot a BB gun into a report screen and you have to figure out the data there. So there's probably visualizations you might probably want to stay away from, but all the visualizations have alt text, and you can also do data labels, and you can also make the title of the visualization more clear. So really depends on the visualization that you have. I hate to use depends, but yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yeah. All right, looks like it's wrapped up with questions. I think I get everybody. If you think of another question, like I said, I'll work with Johnny. So just ping me if you have a question you think of on your way home tonight. You want to make sure you get the question answered.
Thank you, Tim, so much for coming
Sure.
and presenting that. It's been very interesting and a subject that has been very, very popular. So for everybody here, we will post his presentation once we get it, and we will also post a recording for you to go back and review. And if there's no more questions, then thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. I'm emailing you a PDF for the presentation right now. Usually with the PowerPoint, it's a little too much to email, but if you want the PowerPoint itself, I can probably share it from OneDrive if that works for you, Amy. Then you can kind of give it back out to your colleagues.
Okay, sure. Whatever works for you, Tim. That's fine.
Okay.
And he does host a weekly Power BI meeting
Yep.
on Thursdays currently. I
Yep,
can
yep, yep.
forward an invite to that if you want.
Yep. Everybody's welcome. Bye, everybody.